Welcome back. Well, with Russia gripped by election fever, the world is eagerly awaiting the outcome. Some worry that under President Vladimir Putin, Russia has become more assertive and nationalistic on the international stage. Moscow has clashed with Washington over US plans to site a missile defense system on its doorstep in Eastern Europe. They've argued, too, over Iran's nuclear program, with Putin opposing the need for fresh sanctions. Fears also exist about Russian interference in neighbouring Georgia. Russia was accused, too, of employing strong-arm tactics last January when it abruptly halted millions of barrels of oil destined for the EU in a move condemned across Europe. Well, we're still joined by a guest in Moscow, Alexander Pikyov, a political analyst from the Institute for World Economy and International Relations. He also served as advisor in the Defense Committee at the Duma. In London, Alexander Nekrasov, author and a former advisor to late Russian President Boris Yeltsin. And in Washington, D.C., Nicholas Gvozdev, editor of the National Interest and a senior fellow of strategic studies at the Nixon Center. Mr. Pikayev, with Russia having such large oil and gas supplies, do you think we'll see them increasingly use this as a political tool as their standoff with the West increases?
Well, I would say that so far Russia carefully tried to avoid using its huge energy resources as a political tool, although it was widely accused in that. However, Russians unfortunately are good pupils of bad teachers, and our American friends tend to use their economic leverage very often in order to achieve their certain political interests. So that one day I would not exclude that Moscow would exert such a policy. However, I think that for the moment, as long as Russian-Western relations are not that bad, I think that we now need to speak about interdependence in energy area rather than about using energy for political tool from both sides.
Okay, and let's stay with his political interests, Mr. Nekrasov. Let's focus on the alliances he's been forging: weapon sales to Venezuela, India, and military exercises with China. I mean, that's a rather formidable axis against the West, isn't it?
Well, on the face of it, it looks as if Putin is trying to sort of launch this big military build-up, and he's even hinting at in his speeches that if America doesn't behave properly, there would be a new arms race. But let's look at the figures. Russian military budget is about, what, 100th or something of the American budget. So all of this talk about a potential standoff between the two countries is rubbish, of course, because how on earth can you compete with a superpower like America and with its weaponry? It spends more money on one war in Iraq alone than Russia spends on all its weapons. So all of those sort of deals with other countries, I think they are mostly gimmicks, because they're mostly to convince the domestic audience that Russia is reviving, Russia is becoming strong again. I don't think it's becoming strong again, because the might of Russia will be strong then when the economy starts to develop properly, when it's not a one-sided oil dollars and gas dollars economy. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't see that. We don't see it being diversified. So I think Putin is a very cunning PR man. He plays, into the hands of those patriots and nationalists in Russia by saying we need to have Russia becoming a strong nation. And as recently as a few months ago, he said we must, for example, build new planes, the planes which we might be military planes, civilian planes, and so on. And then came the figures. They built 6 planes this year. 6 planes this year. So where I don't really see how Russia can compete as a full-time, full-powered partner with Western Europe and America. I also see another thing. I also see Western Europe and America playing a sort of a game and pretending that Russia is becoming dangerous. Because let's face it, if America or Western Europe really wanted to put pressure on Russia, on the regime in Russia, it's a very simple thing to do. I mean, where's all the money kept? The money kept in London banks, in Paris banks, in New York, and so on, of the people who matter in Russia. So it's a very simple leverage. And for Russian officials to come out and say, we are going to be tough with the West, it sounds childish.
Okay, well, Mr. Gvozdev, I mean, they've been stamping their feet about the expansion of NATO and also this proposed missile defense shield. Do you think this is why they pulled out of the conventional arms treaty?
In part, I think that there's a sense that the treaty was not being implemented by a number of other signatories, and therefore why should Russia be held to its obligations? There's always been this long-standing dispute between Russia and the United States over what was agreed about German reunification in 1990 and that NATO wasn't supposed to expand or put components further east. And so I think that it was a kind of, well, we'll suspend, or we can, if you, the United States, pull out of things like the ABM treaty, we can do things like this as well. I don't know that it really has, it has a symbolic value. It doesn't have as much practical value. I mean, I don't think anyone is worried about a rusting tank battalion being deployed to Pskov to somehow threatens Germany. But it does send this signal, I think, that Russia is less likely to simply accept a Western or U.S. definition of state of affairs and will do, even if it's symbolic, a weapons sale here, not agreeing to sanctions there. It's sending a message that U.S. chairmanship of the international board is not automatically accepted. One just quick note to Alexander's point about dollars in banks in the U.S. Certainly the U.S. could put greater pressure, but on the other hand, funding our current and federal account deficits these days, we're happy to take dollars from wherever they come. And therefore, we're not going to be excluding dollars flowing into the United States anytime soon, simply because we have to pay for our deficits here. So we could always put greater financial pressure on Russia, but in an absence of a U.S. Congress that doesn't want to cut spending, I think we'll continue to take the money coming in from Russia.
Okay, Mr. Pikayov, do you agree that there's a sort of high-level game being played here? And do you agree that through this, he's recreated the idea of a Cold War?
Well, actually, no one is talking about the Cold War here. But what we are talking about is about respect. The United States and the West in general failed to respect Russia in the 1990s. The West wanted Russian unilateral concession. And now the feeling is that Russia needs to revive and Russia needs to say no to the West because when its important interests are in jeopardy. At the same time, cooperation should continue on some important matters which are of mutual interest, particularly war in Afghanistan, war against international terrorism, particularly nuclear terrorism. We are interested in we are jointly interested in some elements of global governance, so there are important common interests which would prevent us to slide into the new Cold War. However, the new Russian economic growth, which is, by the way, only now 2% of it is thanks to the high oil prices, and 5% is because of investment, direct investment into manufacturing industry. It's very interesting phenomena which was registered during last 2 or 3 years.
And that's a phenomenon which I'm sure we're going to be debating for a while. Mr. Alexander Pikayov, sorry to cut you off there, and Mr. Alexander Nekrasov and Nikolai Gvozdev, thank you all for joining us, and thank you very much for watching this edition of Inside Story. As always, we welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. That's insidestory@aljazeera.net. Goodbye for now.